We are often obsessed with planning for the future, predicting the future, guessing the future, or shaping the future, that we sometimes forget the reality. Future is mostly unpredictable, and we feel overwhelmed by new developments, changing our original course. And yet, this is absolutely normal. So maybe instead of trying to be as accurate as possible for planning the most probable future, we could map different possible futures and think, what could we be doing or how could we be reacting in each of those realities? Well, this is scenario building. 3 types of scenarios are used in strategy building: predictive, normative, and explorative scenarios. Predictive scenarios answer the question, what will happen? This is about forecast, trying to guess or predict the future or ask what-if questions. As this includes predictions, we need to assess the probability or likelihood of scenario happening. For example, we might be convinced that the number of inhabitants in our city or region continues to decrease. Therefore, we need a strategy that considers the smaller number of people, both as creative professionals as well as visitors and consumers and participants. In this example, the strategy is designed to address the new realities and make us still relevant in the new conditions. Normative scenarios try to answer the question how a specific goal or a target could be achieved. It means that we know exactly where we want to be in the future, but the ways to reach the goal might be different. For example, if we have decided to build a new cultural center, we might think of a scenario A, if we get a European funding for the building, or scenario B, if we don't get the European funding and we must use our own resources. In both examples, the center is at the heart of our strategy. But in one case, we could have bigger and better center, built faster. In another case, we might make some necessary cuts to the original plans and take more time, but we are still planning to complete the project. The most interesting type of scenarios for creative city strategies is the third type, explorative scenarios. Unlike predictive scenarios that try to understand what will happen, the explorative scenarios answer the question what can happen. The underlying difference is that explorative scenarios map most relevant developments that can influence us and provide a map of possible futures that we need to prepare ourselves for. But in practical terms, how are explorative scenarios created? This is a simple step-by-step approach. Firstly, you need to set your vision. Where do you want to be in the future as a city or an organization? This is an important step because your vision needs to be tested and validated in different futures. Secondly, you need to identify trends and forces in the external environment. These forces are divided into local forces, those that impact only specific sector or area, and the macro forces, larger forces impacting entire society and also shaping the local forces. Thirdly, when macro forces are identified, we need to understand which of them are certain and which of them are uncertain. For example, increased digitalization of society is a certain macro force. In the foreseeable future, the role of digital society will only increase. But the way people will react to the increased role of digital technologies is up for the debate. Does it mean that people want more to access cultural experiences through digital means? Or they actually want more real, physical, authentic experiences that could compensate the digital world around them? Both are possible. Therefore, this is an uncertain force. Fourth step, you need to select 1 to 3 uncertain macro forces as axes for your scenarios. If you select, for example, 1, then you will end up with 2 scenarios. If you select 2, you can end up with 4 scenarios. For example, we could build 4 scenarios based on 2 axes. If people want more digital cultural content, or they want more physical, unplugged experiences. And secondly, if society keeps on polarizing and fake news will prevail, or if social cohesion strengthens and media literacy improves. Fifth step in scenario building. You create scenarios for each of those possible outcomes at the axis. Again, it is not about having positive and negative scenarios, or scenarios you really, really want and those that you really, really want to avoid. Because we are working with uncertain but possible futures. All described scenarios are possible. They can all take place. So scenarios should describe the conditions as neutrally and thoroughly as possible. Scenarios are descriptions of chain of events or changes in all possible futures. Finally, sixth step, when different scenarios are identified and described, we need to craft strategies for each to benefit from, to thrive in, or survive from them. Too often we tend to call certain macro forces simply good or bad. In essence, they are not good or bad in themselves. They can be very good for us if we can turn these trends to our strength. Or they can be very bad if we miss the opportunity. For example, aging population for museums and libraries. Well, aging population itself is not a good or a bad for museums and libraries. If they can come up with good cultural offer to attract older people and use their potential, it can be very beneficial for cultural institutions. And if they miss the opportunity, it can be very bad. So it comes down to our strategy within different scenarios. So why is scenario planning good? Well, because it helps to identify important and relevant trends and forces in our environment that could impact us significantly. It creates a clear link between our vision and external environment and highlights the steps we need to take to address fundamental changes. It develops common awareness, understanding, and language in the organization or group regarding the future trends. And finally, it contributes to risk assessment and builds readiness to tackle unknowns. Scenarios for creative cities are particularly important, not only because the trends impact cultural sector, which they do, but also because creativity is a tool to turn challenges into opportunities. So let's use this potential wisely.